Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today for our presentation on using Microsoft Intune to deploy programs, updates, and files. My name is Jason Kunkel. I'm with CAD Microsystems. I'm really excited to be joined by Omer Mushawar from Torty Gallus. If he wasn't here, we would not have a presentation. Really happy you're able to join us for the next hour or so. We are using GoToWebinar. Just a quick note on that, if you have a question during the presentation, please use the GoToWebinar questions panel and ask them there. We'll find some points throughout the conversation. I'll keep an eye on it over here, and then we'll get those answered throughout the talk as well. Real quick about CAD Microsystems. If you haven't joined us for presentation before, we are a consulting firm. We specialize in software, training, professional services, and BIM expertise for commercial and public sector customers in design, build, and operate industry. We have a team of industry recognized experts, published authors, registered architects, engineers, construction experts, and top-rated speakers at AU and Built. Our customers call us when they're frustrated with their design processes and technology and want to improve efficiency, add new capabilities to win more work, and stay competitive. We like to take what we call an educational approach to solving our customers' challenges. Our focus on helping each organization achieve their business goals. So speaking of that educational approach, we are really excited to have the kickoff of the AU Passes presentation platform that we've got going on today. We're trying to empower design and construction community to share knowledge, connect with each other, and this AU Passes series came from feedback we got from many of our customers like Omer who were frustrated at submitting to Autodesk University, but not being accepted. It wasn't because their presentations ideas weren't innovative, they weren't relevant, but frankly, you can only cram so much into a 3-day conference. So this is our first AU Passes event. We're really excited. We're thrilled to be kicking off with Omer. I was fortunate enough to get a preview of this presentation. Omer, do you remember what I said when we first watched this, when you gave us the show?
Yeah, and hopefully I don't butcher this, but you said I unironically love it.
Yep, I want to make sure I was not, there was no hyperbole, there was no exaggeration. This solution spoke to me. In the past when I was working in IT, I was in that spot, had to manage about 100, 150 desktops with Autodesk software. And, we were too big to run around and just touch every workstation on the weekend to do updates, but we were too small for that $10,000 software management solution. I think what you found here and what you identified here hits that sweet spot. I think it's going to help a lot of our customers out.
Yep, and I agree. I mean, we're right in that kind of sweet spot. A little bit about us. We're a 70-year-old architecture firm celebrating our 70th year this year. I've been with the company roughly 18 years. So we've seen the evolution, especially with Autodesk products and how to roll them out. And having 3 offices and remote workers all the time, this is the thing that we were like, we have to make this work. And so we made it work. And now we're here to share it with you. So with that, just kind of jump into the agenda here a little bit. Some of the things we'll cover today, some of the requirements of using Intune, types of installations you can use, some of the products we get from CAD Microsystems like Bluebeam, Autodesk, we deploy out through this, how to kind of run the installs, some of the options, how to create packages, some of your deployment options of how you want users to be able to run the install, using Company Portal, which is a big key piece of this for our end users, and then some of the reporting you get out of it. A lot of this is available depending on some of your licensing, and we'll get into that in just a moment. So obviously some of the first requirements, Intune or Endpoint Manager, Microsoft likes to go back and forth with the naming on this. It is now Intune, even the cloud product. Some of the requirements, obviously you need to be using Azure Active Directory, also now called Entra. So you'll hear those kind of intertwined as they keep changing names, with your computers kind of joined to that Azure environment. This is what lets Intune kind of see the devices and help manage it. On the other side of that, the licensing you need needs to include an Intune Plan 1. This can be in the form of your 365 licensing, depending on what packages your company runs. So your IT group or your Azure manager administrator would probably know what you have. Should you not have a licensing that kind of falls in this list, they do have an add-on license, so you can add it at any point to help manage your systems. But these are kind of the basic packages that comes in as default, and you can get started playing around with it and trying to set it up for yourself. Some of the advantages that we found, obviously Autodesk products can be a pain to update. Admin rights are a big thing. You know, those of you dealing with security requirements, things like that, you don't necessarily want to give everybody admin access to the laptops. Using company portal and InTune, you don't need to. It'll run with the system account, so you never need to kind of give out that password. The installations all come down from Azure, so all anybody needs to install something is an internet connection. You don't have to go over VPNs anymore, don't have to be connected to the office. Some of this will depend on how you package it and what you ultimately do for your packaging, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Installations are available anytime. You're not getting those calls at 2 a.m. I'm in a rush, I need a new version of Revit. Someone can just go click and start the install. And then for us on the IT side and management side, just seeing the reporting on, oh, this machine failed to install for some reason. This gives you that point of view to go in. You'll get a running list of all your apps, and you can see who might be missing something and can go in and help them from there. So when you decide to start down this journey, the first thing is there's a lot of types of installations you can do. Microsoft makes it pretty easy. If it's something in the Microsoft Store, it's like 3 clicks. Those of you using Adobe products, Creative Cloud Desktop is there. You can deploy it like that in a second. Microsoft apps, think of this like your Office kind of Teams things. You can create deployments just clicking through and making a few selections. Same for Edge. This is where you can push out things for like shortcuts or settings and stuff around Microsoft Edge. Web applications, this is really, you want to add like web shortcuts into the start menu for somebody. We do it for like SharePoint links, things like that. We want everybody to have. Pretty cool. The main ones we're going to work in this kind of presentation is under other. Line of business apps, basically think of applications you make with like an MSI file. So those of you who have the fun of deploying Bluebeam, you know, in that IT deployment package, you have an MSI for the install. Those are very straightforward, and we'll go through that. And then the next one, which is the big one we use for Autodesk products, is the Win32 apps. This is how you package it up, which we'll get into today about creating your packages and kind of uploading them in. One thing I do like to point out, this is kind of a thing, especially if you're bundling Revit, because Revit is massive in terms of these packages. The default size for file packages for any application you make is 8 gigs. So whether you're pushing out files or something like that, Revit generally is in the 10 to 12 gig range. So you just need to have your Azure admin or the person who's set up as your InTune admin open a support ticket with Microsoft, and they up you to 30 gigs. And I just throw that out there because if you're doing it in this bundle kind of way, that's something you'll want to take care of. It takes them a couple days, and they'll get you going. So one of the big things as we start to make our package is install behavior. I always like to point this out because whether the system or user installing it really matters based on the application. So system install, think of this as any of your big apps, and you know, like Bluebeam, Autodesk products, anything you're packaging that's kind of a bigger install that needs those full kind of admin rights to fully install in your system, you're gonna want to set it up as a system install. User install, we use this because it targets the user profile folders. So think of this like Teams. You can do, you know, some of the other VC stuff if you have like a phone system like Ring Central, things like that. We use this a lot for our INI files. So if a user's INI gets corrupt, we have an app that targets the INI files, reloads the INI files on them. They can do it at any point. Just come in and request it, and then it replaces their INI on the machine, and they're good to go. So for all of our pre-made Revit shortcuts we want in there, that's what we do. But those are just one of the settings to kind of hop through. So when we go through creating an app, this is for the, like, you know, you have an MSI, think Bluebeam, Enscape, stuff like that. Super easy. You literally just upload the file. You have to fill out a few key fields, the name of the application that you want deployed. You can add a description. We generally take release notes and copy them in if anybody's curious. Most people don't read it. And the command line to run it. So for Bluebeam, we kind of take the same kind of command line we would if we were pushing it out through policy or anything else. put it in there, and it's just going to grab that file and go. One of the few things you do after you save the app is kind of set permissions. Something like Bluebeam, which we give to everybody, we just make a required app. It'll just go and automatically install. People don't have to go into it. If it's something like, say, a version of Revit, where not everybody in our office is on every version of Revit, we set that up so they have access to it in Company Portal, and they can install it at any point in time. When we get to that screen where we look at setting permissions, you'll see what allows Company Portal to see an app versus not, and we can talk about that in a little bit. So walking through kind of making your package, this is for kind of anything Autodesk. We found that kind of packaging them up, and even sometimes with some of the MSI files, packaging them up, sometimes it runs better or smoother, just depending on how you call that install. We kind of make a standard folder on our C drive, call it InTune for simplicity. You put your input folder. You think of this as of all your source files. So like that unzipped Autodesk installation folder will be in there. Any PowerShell scripts you may use to kind of run the deployment, anything you're going to call during install will all be in there. And then output folder, this is basically where it's going to put your package file when it's done. The one other item you do need when creating any of these is the InTune WinApp utility file. This is something you can download from Microsoft's website. We will include some of this stuff. There's going to be a Dropbox link that has some kind of pre-made packages, scripts that we're going to share out, and kind of like a walkthrough Word document. So once that's shared out, you'll be able to see this. I even have this folder structure with the Microsoft file in it so that you can play around with it and kind of check it out. But this is kind of the basic setup for creating your package. It doesn't have to be on the C drive, but if you're in PowerShell, it's just easy to change to the C drive and go first going into like a user folder. So kind of the basics of our PowerShell scripts that we use for installs is something like this. We make an Autodesk folder inside our input folder. We put what would normally unpackage from, say, your web download of, Revit or Desktop Connector or something like that in that folder. Our first line in basically our PowerShell script is to copy that folder into the Autodesk folder everybody has on their C drive. For something like Desktop Connector, which I'm showing here, as part of that running install, obviously our first line is to shut down Desktop Connector. So this task kill line basically will close Desktop Connector, and then we'll launch the install. I will say this process works great for everything kind of 2022 and newer, because they kind of changed how the installs work. Some of the older versions don't necessarily work so well as packaged. So if you're still using like 2020 or 2018, we have some kind of legacy projects. So some of that is still kind of a manual install process because it's not, most of our projects are moved up, but it's kind of one of those things where they haven't kind of improved it for this environment. Same kind of deal works for updates and all that stuff. They work really well just like this. So we'll go on to the next. So like I said, this uses PowerShell. When we create the packages, we also use PowerShell to kind of launch the installs, but this is kind of what you'll see on, when you're creating your package. So first thing you do is kind of change into your InTune folder. On one computer, I have it set up as InTune setup. So you name it whatever you want, but just for ease of use, it's going to ask you a few questions. You're going to go into the folder, you're going to launch that exe file from Microsoft, and you'll get this list of questions. What's your source folder? That's the input folder under that folder. When we specify kind of our setup file for, some of the files, if we're doing, the Autodesk, say Revit install or Desktop Connector, we're calling our PowerShell script. So that's going to be under that input folder. And so it knows, hey, when I kick this off, I'm kicking off the PowerShell script that's going to run through and run the install. The output folder is where it's going to put the package file for you. So, we set that up that way. Just when it's done zipping up, it'll go in there. And then, do you want to specify a catalog folder? We say no. This is not a setting we've ever needed to use, but it's one of the questions that come up in it. But basically, once you answer those, it starts packaging. The timing on this is really going to depend on the size of your package. We've seen some of the big Revit ones, obviously, depending on the power of the computer you're using to package this, could take up to 30 minutes just to zip up. if it's like a 10 gig folder or something like that. But it's just going to depend. A desktop connector, things like that, or a gig or less, take a few minutes. But then you'll get your package file that you can upload in and start your app. So what does that look like? So when you go in to create an app on InTune, and we'll get into the web page a little bit later, but basically you select your file to upload, so you can see the blue kind of text right here. There's normally just like a folder to click and select upload. You'll do that, fill in your required fields, like I said, description, publisher, and the name of it. We add a logo, we just grab it off the web. So our users are used to seeing it. And then you kind of step through the creation. So the next screen, the program, the important thing here is calling your PowerShell file. So, this was an example from like a Revit execution we had. You see us calling PowerShell, and we're doing an execution policy bypass just to make sure it'll run without being limited by anything on the machine, any of our other security rules, things like that. And we call the file that's inside the package. Uninstall command, I would tell you half the time we just kind of leave that blank or add a space, and we go back in and fill that in after we do some testing. But you can come back in and edit that at any point. We grab these from the registry key after we install it and just make sure it's calling the right thing. Anything that's kind of packaged like this is generally a system install. So that's going to run with those admin rights, so you don't have to worry about the user having issues or anything like that. Restart behavior, things like that, you can set if you want it to restart after an install. Generally, we haven't. Sometimes we'll have a user who maybe has pending Windows updates or something like that, and they'll see maybe an install fail, and we'll tell them like restart the computer and then run it. We just don't want anybody to kind of accidentally get kicked out and lose work. So we haven't used that. You can. Especially if you're pushing something out at night where if it restarts in the middle of the night, it's not going to cause any issues, but that's really up to you. And then just to point it out, this is kind of the uninstall string in the registry that we have written here. You'll find all your applications there, and that'll give you the uninstall command that you can use here on this line. So for setting requirements, which is kind of the next field, there's really not much you have to pick other than the architecture and the minimum OS. We generally just pick 64-bit and then some version of Windows 10. We're all on Windows 11, but if you're set at a certain version, you can set that here as a minimum requirement. This ensures that like something really old isn't going to try to pull in your app and have more issues. So one of the few things there. You can also set kind of disk space requirements if you don't want them to install, if they have less than this much space, that kind of stuff. So that can all be set here. Detection rules are kind of the big thing. When we first started this, we had kind of just targeted the EXEs because we were just doing this for Revit, and we were like, oh, Revit EXE is there, great. When we have gotten more and more into all the apps and noticed, there's 47 versions of CAD that all target kind of the same CAD EXE, we figured it was easier to use kind of the uninstall registry key and look at display versions. So we'll look at, like, here's an example for desktop connector. In the uninstall registry key is the version that is installed, so you can use that to kind of go there and kind of take it that way. One of the other things, like dependencies, supersedence, this is very useful when we're pushing out updates, like Revit 24 1.1 was a big one. So we basically, since we have Revit 24 as an app up there, we can use that as a dependency for the update. So we just say, make sure Revit 2024 is on the machine before you run this install. The big thing after you set these is to hit save, so you don't have to start over again. And once you save after setting all your settings, it starts uploading that file. And then it'll take a few minutes kind of after the upload before the app's available in company portal, things like that.
So real quick, a couple questions pop up, but one that popped in my mind in terms of the dependencies and updates like that. So you could, because you mentioned you don't push Revit on every workstation, obviously.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But you could then push the update to every workstation that it finds Revit on. Like that doesn't have to be a user click at that, does it?
Correct. Correct. You could make that a requirement. There's when you set the dependency, there is a setting where you can pick if it's not there, install it. So you don't want that to be set. Otherwise, when you push that update to machines and require it, it will just install that version of Revit. We have talked about with like newer Revit 2024 making it a requirement because we're kind of shifting everything that way. But you know, that's just one of the settings that, you know, do what works best for you.
Okay, cool. Do we want to get these other questions real quick too while we're there?
Sure.
First one here, where should the source install? Oh my gosh, where should the source install files be stored that you would deploy from?
Sure. So they basically get stored in Azure. When you upload them, they kind of get stored there. So that's really up to you. If like we store backups of our packages in case we have to make changes or things like that. But once you upload them into the system, they're stored, you know, in Microsoft's cloud. That's not something where you're like, you know, having to place them, so to speak. So.
Gotcha. Awesome. Another question: does the workflow work for installs with customizations? For example, they have a package for Civil 3D that has their standards files included. However, there is a variable that is calling the local user registry for each machine. It is due to the root folder being altered and changed to a network location. So assuming this is updating the options file after install, but it needs to look at the specific user registry during that install.
Gotcha. So some of it will depend on how you're doing that now. You can basically push any kind of files, any kind of customization files, any INI files through this. So that's really up to you. If you have the package that you're kind of creating the deployment with, and you want to put these in the package ahead of time so that it's part of that install, you could do it that way. If you're calling it after through either like a group policy currently, you can do the same thing here. You can either, I talked to one firm when we were helping them set this up, where basically they made another app that did all the registry changes or INI files. That was basically, it was a dependency, it required the dependency of the install, and once that was there, it pushed that out. So it's really going to depend on what you're trying to change, but you either can set it up as a separate app or even have that as part of your PowerShell script, or just make a PowerShell script after the app is done to kind of run and do it that way.
Okay, awesome. Yep. One more real quick.
Yep.
I think this is around the updates as well. What if the end user is currently in the Revit version when the update is deployed?
So it's not going to kick the user out. It won't install. This is one of the reasons we don't require the Revit updates and ask the users to kind of, you know, click in company portal, which we'll show in a little bit, and run them kind of end of their day. We don't want anybody to get kicked out. With Desktop Connector, it's shutting down and then turning back on, like, you know, 30 seconds to a minute later after the install, has really no effect on, you know, if the user's working. With Revit, it's kind of a different animal, and especially with the heavy, like construction cloud use and BIM 360, we really don't want to mess with any of that while they're working. So that's one of the reasons we chose to make it like an optional install and have them do it in their time frame. So.
Okay, we are up to date. Thank you for that. Thanks for the questions. This is good stuff.
Yep. So this is one on assigning the app, and you know, here's where you can kind of pick how it rolls out. So this is a field that once your app is saved, you can go in and adjust at any point. But if it's something required, like we put Bluebeam everywhere, so we include all devices. So as soon as the device checks in, if there's an update, or if it's a new device that we've just synced into our Azure environment, when it checks in, it's going to deploy Bluebeam to it. So we don't have to worry about that. In the line where it says available for enrolled devices, this is going to control what shows up in company portal for your users, to where they can select, install, things like that. Even if an app is required, we always also add it to company portal. We've seen scenarios where like a Windows update could screw up an app, or especially with all the ones coming out right now. So they can go in and kind of reinstall that app if need be, if they're having issues. So we're getting that to be visible for them. They can see what they're missing, if they're missing something, and kind of take it from there. So this is on the side of updating your app. So something like Bluebeam. So if we go into our app, you kind of see the properties here. So when Bluebeam puts a new MSI or a new deployment package out, all I have to do is come in, click on the blue text here, and upload my new version of the MSI file. Once I do that and hit save, as machines check in and they're available for the install, it'll just start updating across. There's no there's no real restarts needed, things like that. You just have kind of your command line prompts. Sometimes Bluebeam will change kind of what they want you to call, so just make sure you read that documentation, but you just add that in kind of the command line arguments here, and it's literally just that simple. This works really well for anything with kind of versioning. You know, we do this for web browsers when Chrome puts out an update or something like that. Same kind of thing with the MSIs. We just drop it in here. We don't have to worry about it. When the machine checks in, it's automatically updating. So go on to the next one. So this is kind of company portal. This, you know, something that can be on every device, you know, even on mobile devices. So you have control of apps and where they are. But one thing I always like to talk about is kind of app categories. This is something you can set in Intune. We do this just for ease of kind of separating out stuff where there's updates, where it's Autodesk program, you know, different kind of productivity things. We'll just use categories that we want to make up in terms of this to kind of split it up to make it clean and easy for people to find stuff. There's different views you can look at, but you can kind of see what's installed when they launch it. The nice thing about this is, like, if something's not registered as installed and they already have it and they go to install it, the first thing it does is check if it's there. It'll check whatever our detection rule. If it sees it, it'll just then mark it as installed. So pretty straightforward there. And we'll show that in a few minutes. And then I just want to talk about the reporting. This is important for anybody who's managing any of these products. So you kind of get a list of your apps, anything that has any failures from install for any reason. There is an installs list that Intune has. So you can see kind of device failures, users. You can see all the different reasonings behind it. When you kind of click into one of the apps, here's desktop connector from one of our releases. You can see how many devices it installed on, kind of the user status, device status. This kind of depends on how it's installing and how it's reporting back. But if you click into these, you kind of get a running list of who's still pending, who's failed. And what I'll tell you is some of the bigger packages like Revit or things like that, sometimes it just failed because the detection timeout before the install completed. And if they go back in and check again, it's installed. But it'll give you a full rundown of kind of why it failed and things like that. And then you can either just work with those individuals to fix it. But, you know, you're going from like 150 devices down to like 4 or 5 you may have to do some manual intervention on, which really helps and makes things easier on us. And so I'm going to, before we get to more questions, I just want to hop in and share kind of a few things, just showing these kind of in action. So let me bring this up real quick. I'm going to bring this over to my screen. So just to kind of show, you know, a PowerShell of what you would do kind of in the live. But, you know, we have on our C drive, you know, an Intune setup folder. In our input folder, whenever we're doing anything Autodesk, we make this Autodesk folder. This, for example, happens to be the 1.1 update, right? So we made our PowerShell script. It's in the input folder. I'm going to actually delete this out just so we can see it in real time. But you basically just call open your folders. And once you get into the Intune setup folder or whatever you want to call it, you're going to call the file that Microsoft does for packaging. So you just call that up. And just like the slide we put in our input folder, we're going to specify the name of this file. And sorry, I don't have this one memorized, so I'm going to do a little copy and paste. And we always like to make our PowerShells just the name of whatever we're installing. So it'll be the 1.1 or desktop connector with the version, just to keep it clean. And then our output folder. And no, because we don't do a catalog, but you'll see it just start to package the file. So you'll just kind of follow this, and once your kind of output file is there, you have your Win32 app, and you can kind of just take it from there. You go to upload the app, upload the file, and once it's there, you go through the process. Company portal, which I want to bring up as well, should be on pretty much all the computers. You can set it up to deploy really quickly from InTune, but you can see, it can hold pretty much any kind of app. App categories is what I kind of touched on, where you can start to divide out, make it easier to find things. We have the Autodesk products people can install. We have the updates kind of listed out, or INI files here, and just kind of goes on and on. If you click into one, if one of your end users, this is kind of what they would see. This pulls from the description you add in. If they didn't have it, this would just say install. They can click on it. It starts to queue up, and basically once it's downloaded to the machine, it starts the install and the user's good to go. So it makes it pretty clean. If they're having an issue with it, they can reinstall here. So it just kind of up to the user what they need, and then same with like Revit versions and things like that. So that's pretty much the the chat. Happy to open it up for questions and kind of take it from there.
There was a question on the portal that you were just showing.
Okay.
That just comes from Microsoft, right? That's
Yeah.
just a
Company portal is a built-in Microsoft app. You will see this kind of on the PC side. They have company portal for mobile devices. So if you put out mobile apps from like the mobile stores, you can, if you have Apple devices, you can set up a connection to the Apple store and kind of pre-populate a list for your staff. Like Autodesk or AutoCAD for mobile is there for like our iPads and Bluebeam and stuff like that. So
awesome. Yeah, definitely some more questions here. There's a question on applications that can be installed side by side, like you can have V20, V21 Bluebeam.
Mm-hmm.
What are your strategies and how do you manage that? And do you get rid of one? And yeah, just kind of talk about that.
Sure. So with Bluebeam specifically, we didn't have them. We had them side by side when we pushed it out for 21. There's nothing in the Bluebeam install that kind of would remove the other one unless you're doing the uninstall script or anything like that. But for versioning, we always create a separate app. So it's its own app in the InTune world. So if we had 2020, that would be one. If we had 2021, it would be its own app. So they're handled separately by the system and how it looks.
Okay, awesome. Let's see, we've got, let me scroll up, sorry, a bunch just came in. I know the desktop connector has several steps of signing out, exiting, and uninstalling before a new update can be installed. I'm assuming this is like the 15 to 16
yes
jump. How would you deploy that with all those steps?
Sure. So this is going to depend on your version of Desktop Connector. If you're already on 16, it's a much cleaner process now. 16, you can just kind of call it over. The only thing you really have to do is exit the application. With 15, it was a bit more of a complicated step, and I would tell you the upgrade from 15 to 16 was not a fun process. We actually kind of pushed out 16, and we just we dealt with the nightmare that caused with cleanups and things like that. But now that everyone's on 16, it's very smooth because it's just an exit and kind of run through. The big issue with jumping 15 to 16 was you then had to select projects. They weren't already selected. So there was some stuff the users had to do once the install hit and kind of launched and stuff like that. But now that everybody's on 16, it's just, we just have that line to kind of close it out and then it runs and we're good to go.
Awesome. Question about forcing an update. I think we touched on that a little bit, but yeah, go back into that.
Yeah, so this is your required install. So anything you make required, it's going to force install. You can basically, set up anything you want as an app and make it a requirement. We do that sometimes with INI files. If we're doing a big update to something, we'll make it required and then it just pushes. If we're doing, say, like a version of CAD, like CAD's on all of our machines. So CAD's kind of one where we make it so it shows up in company portal as an option, but we'll also kind of push that out to everybody as an install. It's going to depend on what it is and kind of what other machines you have. We do, obviously we have some admin side of the house that doesn't need this stuff. So we do have like exclude groups and things like that. if we're trying to limit somebody from getting like a ton of stuff without the machine to run it. So
Awesome. Quick one, the 8 to 30 gig update.
Yep.
Is there a change in cost for
Nope.
Microsoft?
There's no change in cost. It's just a setting on their end, but it does require that either the overall like global admin or someone with Intune administrator access is the one opening the support ticket with Microsoft. You can just do that in your Office 365 kind of admin panel. You can open a ticket with them. I will say it could take 2 or 3 days because they'll go through a couple departments to do it, and then they'll just notify you that it's update. If they ask for a reasoning or validation of why, we always just say, well, we're deploying Autodesk products, and they say, okay, no problem.
That does it.
So let them know your packages are in like the 10 to 12 gig range, and they're like, yeah. So.
Related to that, somebody was asking about application content of size uploading Intune. If there are issues with that, I'm guessing 30 gigs is it. That's pretty much it at that point.
Yeah, we haven't seen anything above 30, and this is also one of the reasons we do all the apps separately. We didn't want to make some gigantic app that just contained everything. Yeah. We also wanted to make sure that it could pull down reasonably depending on internet connection. Obviously, if we have some permanent remote people, we have people internationally, so we can't control kind of what they're connected to. So some of the folks will tell them, like, knowing their internet connection, run this at the end of your day, just let it run and take it from there. So
gotcha. I mean, my gears are going. My gears been going through. I mean, I guess you could, in theory, you could craft your PowerShell to just look for a UNC path that you control, so you're not even using the Intune or the Azure servers.
Yeah. So I've had this conversation with a couple firms. Some people who use cloud, say, storage like Ignite. We use a cloud file system called LucidLink. There are ways to call it off of that. The only caveat I always throw out there is you never know if the person's online with it or if they're on VPN. Packaging it up, and obviously it makes it a bigger package versus just a PowerShell script calling something on your network. This kind of takes that uncertainty out of it, because I know it's going to take the files to run the install and just run it. That's also one of the reasons, like when we package up the files, like say we're doing Revit or CAD or something, we go to the Manage Autodesk website and we do the download install versus the customized package, because we know those are meant just to run as admin on the machine and there'll be no problems, and we can hit it with our customization after the install or put our files into the folders. So it makes it very clean for us. So
perfect. Like, yeah, I have to scroll up. It's all of a sudden. Yeah. There was a request to see what your deployment folder looks like. I'm not going into detail, just curious the layout. And there was kind of, I think, a related request to walk through a fresh install of Revit. Now, I know you're giving some samples of some of the stuff. Is that probably a good place to look once we get those out there? You can download the PowerShell and like some screenshots and stuff.
Yeah, so there's a Word document. There will be some prepackaged deployments, which are literally just the off-the-shelf Autodesk unzipped installs from the web downloaders. So we don't have any customization things in there. So if you want to use those, feel free to test out with them. Basically what I showed you, we take whatever unzips to that C Autodesk folder from the downloaders, put it into that Intune setup folder in the input folder under the Autodesk one. And that's why our first line of all our PowerShell scripts are copy to C.Autodesk, Autodesk, and start the install from there. They're meant to run from that folder a lot of times. So if there's anything that could be found like linking wise, it always works well.
Awesome. And do you get the command line from the little setup shortcut?
Yeah, so depending on the install, like some of the patching, like 1.1, or whether it's the -- silent, someone works with the -Q for quiet, things like that. We'll get it from their documentation and just kind of take it from there.
Okay, awesome. Let's see what we got. There's some questions. I don't think they're exactly for you.
Okay.
But, how you monitoring all the updates from Autodesk? I think that's just something we all are tackling. I mean, do you just watch the Autodesk access periodically?
Yeah, between myself, some of the other folks in IT, and our BIM managers, we kind of keep an eye on what's coming. Obviously, access will pop up when you have updates available. We do have, like on my machine, because I test all the installs, I have pretty much everything installed. So it's always checking. We've pushed out the licensing updates. We've pushed out pretty much all those kind of single sign-on updates, things like that. And those we won't necessarily show in company portal, so we'll just make them required and not list it, so someone has to go in and install it. But it just handles it really well. Whereas if I really wish Autodesk would make it easier, where you didn't need that admin install off of Access, kind of like Adobe does. Once that Creative Cloud client's there, you can just you don't need admin rights to update and kind of thing. But in the interim, this has been a great solution to kind of do that.
So do you have Access installed in as desktops?
Well, it installs with desktop connector. So it installs with some of the apps. So yeah, everybody's kind of seen it. It took over for what do they call it? Desktop.
Yeah, the ADA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Desktop application manager or something like that. Yeah.
That was not long ago. We should not have forgotten this already. What's going on here?
They bundled it with version 16 of desktop connector, so that kind of took over.
And you just tell folks, ignore this.
Got
your back.
Yeah. Well, like if there's an update, if it's someone who desperately needs it, and we can get them admin rights, that they can do it. But generally, we'll just say, give us like a day, and it'll be up in InTune, and they can just launch it from there.
Gotcha. Here's an interesting question. Is there a good way to stop an app installation in InTune once it's started, say to amend it in testing and redeploy?
To stop it in terms of,
I think during testing, if it's in some weird loop, or it's just, it's garbage, but it's going to take long, and yeah.
So if you're seeing one that's not working, basically it'll time out on the endpoint, and so there is kind of a timeout thing for it. As soon as it's kind of up, like the full upload is in, you can go in and edit anytime you want. It does take time for it to process any new upload. Just so that's then the active package, so to speak. But when I say time, I mean if you're uploading like a 10 gig Revit one, within like 30 minutes, the new one's in place. But obviously you got to think of your time to upload it, just depending on the size of your package and stuff like that. So
very cool. There is a question on support here, which actually I'll comment on real quick. We have our own help desk. We have our CAD care here. I would be remiss if I didn't say they are amazing at supporting Autodesk and Bluebeam applications. We are not a Microsoft support shop. So this is one reason we love having this new program and having Omer here. He's being able to share his knowledge on things that we know is in the circuit around here. It's kind of like Pluto floating around. It's there. But no, we do not support Microsoft. Omer is very busy. So, he is very generous with his time in giving this out. And I would say, take a look at the samples that he's providing and see what you can do. And then, frankly, just go your usual support routes. Go to Google, go to Microsoft's website and kind of dig things up. It's kind of a much larger support platform than a lot of the stuff we have to deal with.
Yeah, I would say when we first started kind of venturing into this, there was not much on like the Autodesk forums. We would get like one question, we found like one post where someone did it for CAD but couldn't really make it work for others. This kind of packaging seemed to kind of clean up a lot of that. Just packaging the web download files. And so, doing that, I've started posting a little bit on the Autodesk community forum, so there is some more there. So when I can, I'll try to post more. But you can find me on LinkedIn, and we can chat. I'm happy to help support where I can. But
awesome, and yeah, technically this is not Autodesk supported.
Yeah.
But yeah, even on the page it says this is not supported. There's like links to how to do it.
Yeah.
So it's. It's like, all right, I'm not sure what to take with that. It's a little passive.
It's not their ideal deployment tool, but yeah.
Right. But they certainly recognize that people are using these and you got to use it. And then once it's on your desktop, the application will be supported.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just Autodesk will not support InTune deployment.
Yeah, and I don't know how many people are on the IT side of the house, but you know, a lot of us in the AC world, it's, you know, we're multiple offices, we're people remote, and we're generally small teams. And so anything we can do like this that we have included, like we really looked into this because we're coming up on renewal of a deployment tool we had. We're like, hey, we get this. Let's figure this out. And once we did, we're like, oh, okay. So this
Awesome.
makes things a lot easier.
Love it. I
Let's
love
share.
it. But
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how much I love it. I mean, I was using the Windows SUS, I think it was back in the day. And I'm like, this, what you're doing is how that should have been doing it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and you know, kudos to Microsoft because they've made this a lot better than what it was. And you know, it used to just be SCCM, and then it's evolved into this cloud solution that's been very helpful.
Fantastic. There is a question about the entitlements. Can you go back to that slide that listed where the entitlements were? Maybe this will answer that question. Like which versions of Office you have to have.
Oh, the licensing, sure.
Yeah, they've got a mix of G1 and G3.
So a G3 definitely has it included. You know, so this is kind of off of one of Microsoft's licensing pages. You know, depending on what you're doing for the G1 users, there is an InTune Plan 1 add-on. So if it's not something where you generally would want them up to the G3 level, that's a route you can do. There's also different versions of InTune licensing where there's a package that offers things like remote help, things like that. This is kind of the beginner introductory level licensing you need at a minimum, but they have all sorts of licensing levels. So while your initial package may not have it, you may have access to an add-on that does.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we have gone through all the questions. I kind of merged some of those up. Hopefully we answered everything there for everybody. Yeah, we are at 45 minutes, so I think we'll start wrapping down here. Want to thank everybody for joining us. It was mentioned earlier. I think it was put out in the chat as well. There's going to be a follow-up email to this. It'll have a link to the recording. It'll have a link to the Dropbox where you can grab all the stuff. If you want to reach out to us, feel free to do so. Here with the emails on Twitter, we're all over the place. The next slide, we've got the AU passes slide again. There is a QR code there. Feel free to scan it. This is the form we are taking for submissions for your past submissions that were not accepted. We're kind of excited about this little, I don't know, it's like a Lost Boys type thing here. Pretty stoked. This is all kind of being structured by what we call our BIMXT program. You may have seen BIMXT Online. We started up during the pandemic. It's got a very large following at this point. We are restarting up our in-person events. Excuse me. We've got, oh my gosh, that's 7 there now. They're kind of evolutions of our old Revit user groups. We're trying to expand our topics, expand what we're talking about. Please feel free to reach out and we can get you contact info for there. And then online on LinkedIn, we have our BIMXT network. This video will be housed there. This is where you can probably find future mentions and future recordings of other AU passes presentations as well. So with that, we're in great shape. That was awesome. I mean, I really appreciate it. Some really good questions and a lot of folks sticking around for it. I think people are really going to be able to use this. Really appreciate your time.
Happy to share. Like I said, we're ACIT small but mighty. So
there you go.
Please reach out. Happy to talk to you all about this. So.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
See y'all.